welcome. I'm going to call the special meeting of the Nevada City Council to order. Today is Wednesday, September 21st, 2022, and it is 5 p.m. I would like to ask somebody to do the land recognition. Does everybody have the? Sure, I'll do it. Oh, there you go.
We acknowledge the Nisenan people are still here among us today, though they are nearly invisible and their story continues to be excluded from history. We understand we are on Nisenan land that was never ceded, and the original tribal families have yet to recover from the near genocide of their people. As a resident or visitor in Nisenan land, we support the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan tribe in efforts to stabilize their people, as well as their campaign to restore tribal sovereignty through federal recognition.
Thank you. All right, so we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Lou, would you like to lead us?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Madam Deputy City Clerk, could you do the roll call?
Yes. Councilmember Ceci?
Here.
Councilmember Klein?
Here.
Councilmember Peterson?
Here.
Vice Mayor Fernandez?
Here.
And Mayor Fleming?
Here. Great, we're all here. Okay, so we are going to adopt the agenda unless there are any objections. We're going to consider the agenda adopted.
Just the one item, so
Yeah, okay.
unless you want to get rid of it.
Nope, I think we're here. We've done so much work and everybody's put in work. I think we're going to do it. But I would like to open up for public comment, and this is Government Code Section 54954.3 provides that any member of the public may address the City Council on any matter not on the agenda that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city. The Brown Act, with limited exceptions, does not allow the council or staff to discuss issues brought forth under public comment. The council cannot take action on non-agendized items. Concern may be referred to staff or placed on a future agenda. Please note that comments from the public will also be taken on each agenda item at the time it is heard. So, do we have any public comment in the room today on subjects not on there? All right, then, do we have anybody online that would like to comment?
We have no attendees.
What?
All right.
How dare they not attend? Okay, so no public comment. All right, on to the business at hand. Take it away, Sean.
Awesome. I'm going to share my screen into Zoom land so you can see it on your screen. It's also the same PowerPoint that's on your iPad and is imprinted in front of you. And for those in the audience, it'll be on the screen up there.
Oh, Dwayne's here.
I've been seeing him all day.
Have you? Transportation.
All right.
Did you see it?
All right.
It's okay.
There we go.
It's okay.
So it's one slide, strategic planning workshop, we're done.
Liar.
Liar.
I mean, that was a lie, right?
It was a misstatement. As the council knows, maybe some in the audience at home don't know, the city's previously undergone what they refer to as strategic planning. Nothing wrong with it. It was great. The council did it with staff every year and created a task list, things to get done or to accomplish in each given year. But we haven't historically undergone a comprehensive strategic planning process, and certainly not what I would refer to as a community-driven strategic planning process. So we're currently undergoing that process, I would give kudos to the current council configuration as well as the previous council configuration who set the ball in motion for this, because it's both a daunting process and it can feel for council members and for staff, it can feel like it's a lot to solicit so much stakeholder input. But if we're building a 5-year plan on everything that we're going to be doing in the community, it's certainly worthy of getting as much input as possible. And so tonight is not the end of the road by any means for that input, and it's not even the final step in creating the plan. But we're really looking to pour the foundation this evening for what will eventually become our strategic plan. Many of those foundational elements you will likely ask for additional stakeholder input in, and we'll go over that through this evening. So I would note, and I always put this on my slides anytime I'm doing any kind of strategic planning, that this entire process doesn't bring any revenue to the city. So there's not a per word tax or anything like that that goes along with strategic planning. So the art of it is embedding the work into what we already do, and but also you should consider that the more things you want to do, the more we will need to find ways to optimize services and or raise capital to be able to provide those things. Doesn't have to be on the taxpayer's back, doesn't have to be on our back. It could be a myriad of ways, but there is no money in what you're doing this evening. So setting the foundation, a little over 2 years ago, it sounds like, the council decided that the city needed a change fundamentally in its relationship with City Hall and with the community, and you were right in the middle of COVID, and so I think it was probably a gloomy hour or a couple of years maybe, but I'm personally excited to be here. I'm the first bullet on that list for setting the foundation, hire a new city manager, but that's certainly not the first thing that happened. But among the things you did to get us here, this answers the question, why didn't we start strategic planning 5 months ago? You hired a new city manager. You, as a council, and the people in the room, staff, the chamber, community members, really built back the relationship with City Hall and the community and the council. We hired a CFO. We went without for a while, which also meant that we didn't have a budget. We delivered a timely budget. We've completed the outstanding audit and are now back on track, having just started the audit for the fiscal year that just ended. We've built a relationship back with the Chamber of Commerce and the businesses. It's certainly not perfect, probably never will be from their perspective, but that's okay. They should expect the continued dialogue and openness of City Hall. I wouldn't say we're out of COVID. We may never be out of COVID, but we certainly have transitioned out of the crisis mode of COVID. And one of the things that was in there was what you adopted the last meeting at the outdoor dining ordinance. We have new council members. We hired a new police chief, began a transition to, it says COP, that's short for community-oriented policing, or chief of police, could go either way. We've hired new police officers. We've purchased new police vehicles. We've done over $1 million in storm damage repair, and we've submitted for grant reimbursement of the lion's share of that. And we've released a parking demand study. So that's not an exhaustive list, but you as the council, the folks that work for the city, and the community members that have given input have done a lot in setting the foundation for where we go from here. Key to, like I said, answering that question of why didn't we start this 5 months ago or 2 years ago. The process to date has been, we created interim strategic initiative and goals in the annual budget. I really just took what the council had already created and directed in some capacity and added them in that format. We've conducted 2 community strategic workshops, strategic planning workshops, planning commission workshop, employee workshop, and then we released a survey instrument. The data that you'll see in here is as of close of business last Friday. We've received 42 surveys since then. I would say that they largely don't fundamentally skew the data set, with one glaring exception that we'll talk about later, which is we got a whole bunch from teachers at Seven Hills that would very much like to partner with the city on a field and some amenities for the kids in that area for a variety of reasons. So all the rest of the items that were in those 42 surveys are very consistent with what we found. So I'd like to thank everyone who participated. Definitely like to thank all the staff who have been, most of who are not new have stayed with all of you through COVID and invested in this. And they'll be the ones that have to execute to live the strategic plan through. So the participation, like I said, this is close of business Friday. 320 participants between all the sessions and the surveys. The survey age variance there, pretty normal distribution. We were at low numbers for under 18, but last week we got several.
Thank you to the
Youth.
students at Sale.
Some of the students at Sale and some kids at the park and some kids from Seven Hills and from Nevada Union who submitted those as very helpful. But obviously it skews the heavy towards our older population, which is also what our population looks like. So that's a pretty good representation. The interests are there. About half are city residents, about half are county residents, and then a smattering of business owners, those that work in the city, and people that said other but didn't provide any other detail. And then 70% of the respondents to our surveys have been in the county for more than 10 years. So I think that's significant. Not that if you've only been here 2 days, you don't have a voice, and I want to hear that voice, and I know the council wants to hear that voice, but certainly, your perspective on things may be very different. And like me, being new back to the community, maybe you don't know where all the proverbial bodies are buried or things like that. So we'll just jump right into it. Part of the focus of strategic planning is, not the focus, but really defining, redefining, or reimagining why you exist, where you want to go, and how you're going to get there. The mission statement in any organization is really that why you exist part. So I'll just read this right off the screen. Mission statement is a concise explanation of the city's reason for existence, describes our purpose and overall intent, and it supports the vision and serves to communicate purpose and direction to residents, businesses, visitors, and other stakeholders. So our mission statement, which you've heard from me before, I think is pretty good. The City of Nevada City is dedicated to preserving and enhancing its small-town character and historical architecture while providing quality public services for our current and future residents, businesses, and visitors. Of the people that commented, we asked, are there words that are missing or any words that are included that should be questioned from the mission statement? And you can see that there was quite a few. I think it's 32 items here, and none of them are offensive. There's some good ones in there. There's some ones that maybe I agree with. Doesn't matter. I don't get a vote. But what we find when we do activities like this is it's really hard to rewrite something, by group consensus. And we didn't ask them to. That's why we asked them for words and things like that. I would say that from a general perspective, our mission statement is good. It does not fully encapsulate the definition, and it does not necessarily support our vision statement. But overall, it is definitely supportive of who we are and why we exist. In that regard, what most organizations do when you're looking at something so broad is they don't try to rewrite it from the dais. You wouldn't want me to wordsmith it anyway, because I'm more of a technical writer, so it'll have the right commas, but it might not have the exact words. And you really don't want your city manager to be the only voice in this anyway. So my recommendation is going to be the same for mission and vision this evening, and that is that you would consider directing that an action in strategic planning would be to have a council and community group. Could be a committee, could be a task force, could be done at a council meeting. That doesn't have to be decided tonight, but that we get some people together that are both subject matter experts, good writers, and with good defined, clear rules of the road of what we're doing. And as a part of our strategic plan, that we would look at revising, updating, or keeping in place, if it is the best thing for us, the mission statement. So I know that's a long explanation for saying we're not going to do anything tonight. That's my recommendation. You certainly don't have to take it. But I would love to hear your feedback or thoughts on either that or any of the words that were in the input from the community.
First,
Go ahead. Sure, maybe it's the same question.
I was just going to say, maybe we should just see if there's any changes that we really want, instead of dragging this out and, death by committee. If there's any significant changes that we want, you know, maybe we could just come up with them now. I mean, you know, I could see a few words I'd like in there, but I don't know that we can get that. Do you see some,
Yeah, I think this is fine. It's a fine
Yeah.
mission statement. I think that it doesn't do Nevada City justice. And I agree with Sean, I don't think we should have the conversation here
Okay.
right now, today.
okay, it'll take a little bit more. So,
Yeah.
yeah, let's kick that down the road and, you know, get to the juicy stuff. Adam?
My question is just
sorry.
out of curiosity, this table and other tables like it in this, are these put in an order of, was sustainability the number one most reoccurring?
There's no
order?
priority
Okay.
order to this unless we say there's a priority order. And basically, you're only going to find that in the last couple of questions that were posed to the community. In this case, sustainability was the first one mentioned at the first workshop we did with the community. That's why it's first on the list, because it was on that easel pad.
And are any of these aggregates?
Yes, they, all of what you see in all of the questions are aggregates with the exception of the very last question, which is the number of counts for action items that people would like us to work on. They're still pushed into a broad box, but they're total counts. So yeah, and I didn't put the numbers in here because they didn't necessarily all fit in exactly the same box. It was, you know, if they said sustainability 3 times, I just left sustainability, but then somebody said, like, for example, natural setting and natural beauty. I guess I could have just counted 2 there, but, you know, they're different things, so.
Yeah.
Trying to give you representation of what, you know, what was represented there.
Yeah, maybe we can do a collection of words.
Yeah, Venn
Doug, you
diagram.
said that you had a few that you'd like to add, so we could add
No,
ours to
yeah,
that.
yeah, I mean, I'd just like to see arts and culture in there somewhere, but I don't know that it fits, but.
Yeah, totally. And
And-
that's on the list.
I
Yep,
know.
second column, third one down,
Yeah,
so.
But that's pretty radical change for what we're doing.
I don't know, it's just such a, it's a fine mission statement, if that's what you want, but there's no dynamic to it.
Exactly.
It's not specific.
Yeah, it doesn't
Doesn't
pop.
link to the vision, which is
Correct.
much stronger.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'd swap the vision for the mission statement in a heartbeat.
What's the phrase you always use, Sean, that the crossroads of,
The crossroads of history and progress, or, and that is for lack of a better term, a bastardization of our vision, which we'll get to in a
Sure.
second. So creative license, I think, is what my wife would call it. She's a better wordsmith than me.
What is supposed to be the difference between the mission and the vision statement? Because they look pretty similar to me.
They do, and to Councilmember Peterson's point, you could switch them. In this case, the mission is why we exist. It's why we're here. It is what we are. So cities fundamentally all have a common core of what they are, because they exist to provide service to a community and take your tax dollars and do something with it. I mean, at a space level, right? But I don't think that Nevada City is generic. I don't think we're a Brand X city. You could take lots of cities in Sacramento County or LA County, for example, no insult at all, but they are just happy being exactly like the next town next to them, and that's not Nevada City. So I would not like us to, you know, be that Brand X, but, yeah. And then vision is the next one. So if there's no more questions on that, I'll just jump into vision with what it is.
Yeah, I think we're going to, you know, do this in another session.
Perfect. And all of this will come back to you, and we'll get to this towards the end, but there's many more steps, not a ton more work for you, but many more steps where you get to give input, where the community gets to give input as you refine this to get to the written final strategic plan. And even then, it is a living document. So you know, the day after you put it in place, if it needs to change, it should change, because if it's just something that's going to stay stagnant for 5 years, it's really not worth the effort, because you could just tell me what to do for the next 5 years and I write it down and get it done. But I think we all know that we want much more input than that. So a vision statement, Councilmember Ceci, statement that looks forward and creates a mental image of the ideal state that the city wishes to achieve. So it's where we want to be. Inspirational and aspirational are I don't even think buzzwords. I think they're very good descriptors of what a vision statement should be. And this one is maybe taken out of context often, but vision statements should challenge the stakeholders. And by challenge, I mean think about what we could be, not just what we are, and that we can never be anything better. Take off the myopic lens and think about what really could be. And not the strategic plan, let's just chart a course through that. And then, so our vision statement, Nevada City, nestled in the Sierra foothills, will be, and that's an aspirational future statement, right? Will be a vibrant, uniquely beautiful small town that balances art and culture, historical preservation, and progress. And that's where I take the ending part and talk about the crossroads.
There are definitely some things missing.
Yeah,
Yes.
That is not a good vision statement.
It's a good start, right?
Yeah, but it's more of a, you take out will be, and it's more of a mission statement, as has been pointed out.
And so, and that was brought up by folks in the workshops, and they wanted to see a lot of ads. And, if you included all of their ads, this would be a novella of a vision statement, and it really should probably not be more than a couple, 3 sentences for both the vision and the mission. So it probably is not appropriate to have all of it in there, but certainly worth consideration. So
Shouldn't a mission statement be like 1 sentence usually?
I think like TEDx, TED Talks, their mission statement is 1 word.
yeah,
And Google is the same. They're very brief.
Yeah.
yeah.
The most concise way to like sum up who we are.
Yes, it should be the shortest it can be that conveys the message.
Yeah.
So,
You can flesh out the vision a little bit more.
Just 1 word.
Can we come up 1 word? Oh, let's all come up with a word, and then
it's the city of Nevada City, so I don't even think we
we
can
can't
come
even
up with
do
it in one
our
word.
name in 1 word.
So,
Can't even remember what the
there,
word is.
so
though.
very good discussion,
Their mission statement.
information, and, sharing from the stakeholder groups on this. And I think it also, if you read through it, gives you a broad perspective. There's some that are clearly from business owners, and some that are clearly from residents, and some that are clearly visitors. That is, that's a good thing, but it would take a lot of work to carry through. So my statement remains the same. My recommendation, add this as an action in the strategic plan, have a work group, go through and address these, so.
I think that would be a fun project. I mean, actually, you get some community members who like this kind of stuff, and, I'll be on that committee.
I'm thinking Sheila Cameron. I'm thinking.
Yeah, she's good with words.
Poets, bunch of poets.
We don't have a city poet laureate, but you could create one
Little
in
longer.
the strategic planning
That
process.
Could be a-
It's a little longer.
But that's still,
The other thing I would note that it doesn't include is anything about our employees, our workforce. And they are the people that take taxpayer monies and turn them into customer service. And, our human capital, so to speak, and an incredible asset. And you don't have to include them in there, but I've never worked with an employee group that did strategic planning that said, we should be in the vision statement. But I always like to bring it up just because. So our value statements. So again, value statements are core principles that guide and direct the city and its culture. It's an interesting thing because value statements represent the culture because the people that write them down are part of that culture, but they also drive future culture, into whether you want to call it conformance or whatever term you want to use. That while the mission of cities generically are the same, the values of cities are greatly different. So I would suggest that the fundamental mission of both Grass Valley and Nevada City is almost exactly the same. The values of the 2 cities are vastly different, and that's a good thing, because if they were identical, why be 2 different cities? It says in a values-led organization, and cities are sometimes refer to themselves as values-led organizations, rarely are values-led organizations, mostly because they revolve around dollars and cents. But value statements are, a moral compass. but that helps you guide decision-making. It also helps the employees keep me honest, because if I say X, Y, Z, and they say, well, that's not consistent with our values, that's a good comeback for the boss sometimes. So, so I really like good value statements. I think what we have is good, but if you look at it, you can tell that it was added to over time.
Yeah.
So it starts with embracing and promoting diversity, but then it ends with support for and commitment to a safe, just, equitable, diverse, and inclusive Nevada City. That's
Like
because
an
the last one.
evolution of
Exactly.
that first statement.
Exactly, because that one came most recently, right? And actually, it didn't even include the word safe until March of this year. And when you added it after our Mardi Gras parade.
And I
So,
think that's a great way to bring in our values, is to look at all those resolutions that we've passed, to say, we resolve that such, that we aim to be this. I mean, if we're making resolutions, my big thing is that they don't get lost in the vault of all the resolutions passed, but that we actually live into them and that those words become actions. So I think that's a great way to look at what's missing from our value statement, is to look at our resolutions and see if there's anything.
Would we do that selectively?
What do you mean?
Not every resolution, just ones that are relevant, or, because there's a lot of resolutions, right? About,
I mean, are there a lot of resolutions? I mean, there's proclamations, but resolutions, I feel like there's a,
sort of redefining who we are as a city.
yeah,
Yeah. I don't know, it'll be interesting to see.
just to make sure that it aligns.
Sure. So the suggestion here is to do the same with the mission and the vision.
Question, and, is that the same committee that does all three?
so I would recommend mission and vision definitely be the same, because otherwise they're going to both write the same statement. And it'll be great, but we'll only have one statement. But the values, I have seen it, and I have done it both ways. I've seen it where it is done by that same group. I've also seen it where it is solely done by the council with the input of the community, because in this case, the reason I say that is because we profess that these are the city council value statements, because they are generated from, to your point, Vice Mayor Fernandez, from previous resolutions of the council as to, the actions that you would like to see taken in the community. So either will work. You certainly don't have to decide tonight. The only thing you'd have to do if you wanted to decide tonight would be if you wanted to rewrite it on the dais. And the responses from the community, lots of good words in there, differently than mission and vision, where you are trying to make it as concise as possible to represent what we are, where we're going. Values much different, can be a little more wordy, and certainly can have compound meaning, so like you have in some of your other value statements where you have multiple adjectives.
I have kind of a procedure question. We've now gone through 3 very basic and very broad statements, but have not paused to see if there is any comment from the public on them. Is that because we only allowed that at the beginning of this procedure?
No, you can entertain public comment at any time, so.
Do you want to check online? There's nobody online. Anybody want to comment in here? Nope. But thank you, though.
Thank
That's
you,
always good
yep.
it's always good to check.
I think with the mayor's permission, I think, it's a small group. There's only a handful of people in the room.
Yes.
Certainly, if you want to talk, come on up,
Yes, speak up.
Yes. Don't let us just continue rattling on. We will.
Or let me continue rattling on.
Yes, 'cause he won.
So, yeah, value statements, the recommendation's the same, or make some interim changes if you wanted to. I certainly don't think you have to. There is, I think the first, until you get to the very last bullet point, which is the newest one, most of those, they're all good, and they could either be expanded upon, words could be added to them, you could add new values, or what's commonly done is you take what's there and you add, subpoints or descriptors underneath them that illustrate what the meaning is of those items, with the broad exception that the first and last bullet points are speaking to the same thing. So if that's your desire tonight, we could not kick the can down the road, but decide in the draft, presentation of the draft item, if you wanted that to be a community item handled by Mission and Vision Group, or if you wanted that to be a council item that also seeks stakeholder input.
I
Certainly,
think I agree with Daniela that that should be a council kind of thing. So the other two would be done community with council and community input, and then this one would just be the council. Is that glue, Adam?
Sure.
Everybody's good with that? Okay. All right, now we're jumping into the meat.
all right, SWAT, but with an O instead of an A. Don't get too happy, chief.
That was bad.
Yes, we
That was bad.
only have one item of militarized equipment, right? So that is
Ballistic shields.
That was,
You have a tank?
beanbag rounds.
the one you would not think is the less lethal background.
And the tank.
That's not.
Okay, fellas.
Copy. So SWOT analysis, I'm guessing all of you and everyone at home has heard of this, done it in high school, learned about it in a business class. I could not find one for the city based on
haven't
our
done one.
previous works. It doesn't mean it's not there. I just couldn't find one, which is actually good because start from scratch. And so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Why does it matter tonight? In theory, well, in practice, whatever the initiatives, goals, and objectives you adopt in your strategic plan, they should be in response to bolstering strengths, overcoming weaknesses, capitalizing on opportunities, or negating the impacts of threats. And if they're not, then either one, you shouldn't be doing them, or more likely, you should amend your SWOT analysis to include those items. In that regard, I'll just skip through this part, and the strengths of the city, I think we had 50 strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities, and I only think 32 or something threats. So all of these, I don't know for people at home if they reviewed the content at all in advance, but as you would expect, many of the items show up in multiple categories, because some people will find something a strength while others might find it a weakness. And that's okay. And that's actually, it's a good that, we get that kind of broad perspective. But you also have some just very granular items, like it just says KVMR. Strength. I actually think that is a strength of the city. We have our own
Definitely.
radio station. It's right across the street here. They let me talk on the radio every so often, but I think for everything in strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, the easiest way to do it is for you to tell me if there's anything that should be included that's not, as we move forward in the process, either tonight or in the draft strategic plan, but then also as you give direction on strategic initiatives, goals, and objectives, that at each step in the process, we also look back at the SWOT analysis and make sure that we're using that analysis to drive what we're doing, or we're driving what we're doing based on it. So there's some interesting ones in here for those that are at home, go on our website and look at all of these in the packet. People say hi in quotations is the last one. Pretty sure I know where that one came from, but I actually think that's true.
Yeah, people do.
Yeah.
You can tell when somebody's not from here, because you say hi, and they don't respect, they're like, what are you?
Even when you don't want them to say hi, they say hi.
Especially when you don't want to. I like always something to do. There's always something.
Always something to do.
Public Works Department gets two.
Ooh.
Yes.
I know. And there's no Parks and Rec, so that needs to be added.
stuff.
Yep, and.
And planning.
Yeah, police department is on there. Police department is also considered by some to be a weakness. And that's not calling out our police department. That's a normal assessment of a community. Some people, have great interactions with our law enforcement. Some people have negative interactions with our
That
law
was before
enforcement.
the chief got here.
Yes, now they all have, now they all love Chief Foss, so, and our officers, and I think that, had they gotten to know our officers earlier, they would have loved them at that time too, but we have a lot of new staff that people haven't met, so. Strengths, weaknesses, again, weaknesses, encapsulate, if you compare line for line,
Aging population.
encapsulate a lot of the things that people at the end said that they think we should be working on. So nobody said we should be working on aging population specifically, to your point, Vice Mayor. But traffic, comes up here as a weakness and comes up as something we should work on. Sidewalks comes up here and comes up as something we should work on. There's homeless, fire prevention and safety, turning into Disneyland. I've heard that statement quite a bit. Other weaknesses that you see in here that also come up in threats, PG&E and waste management are here in weaknesses, but they're also external influences that are potential threats. So, variety of things here. Appreciate the input from the community and opportunities. Same way, this should be the things that we could capitalize on, that we're not. Generally, strengths and weaknesses are internal city factors of the city. Opportunities can be either inside the city or outside. Threats are outside of our control.
I'm sorry, I had a question about.
Of course.
weakness. Layout of streets was one of them. Were they any more specific than that?
I've heard that quite a bit from people, and, we weren't laid out in a grid with everything from, focusing outward from a central building.
And we couldn't be.
And so that, if you're not from here and you have to get around here, Chief Foss.
One of the first things where I was like, holy cow, is this a one-way, where am I at, what's up?
Yeah.
And then you look at the wooden signs,
What's that?
and then you look at the wooden signs and try to read them.
Now, as to your point, is it something that's easily fixable? I don't think so, but it is a weakness. I think that's what your point is, right, Sean? They're not always even something we could address, but it is something that we should probably be aware of.
But better street signs, wayfinding in the downtown or the Seven Hills, and updating Google Maps to reflect where everything is, updating the parking lot signs for, all the businesses and things like that, having a QR code on all the businesses where they could just scan and identify where they are, just examples of ways you could take that weakness and change it into an opportunity.
I'm just recalling my very first visit here in 1993. I got lost. And it turned out to be a benefit because I saw parts of town that I just fell in love with. But, yeah.
Yeah. I spent a week one weekend on Gethsemane, just, got lost over there. So the opportunities, lots of interesting things there, and many of them we've heard before, and many of them end up as well in things that people are interested in, public art, tourism, support for businesses, and then some pretty granular ones like the HEW building as an opportunity, the courthouse as an opportunity.
Annexation.
So, yeah, so there's, high-speed, reliable internet is here in opportunities. It was not specifically in weaknesses, but I would say that is a weakness. And then it's also in things that people are interested in us working on. Yes,
Do
sir.
we have broadband issues in town? I mean, significant ones that people aren't connected in our footprint?
Yes.
Yes.
Blue?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, both connection and reliability of connection
And speed, yeah.
are common complaints. Although many of the people that call are from the little town of Washington because they have a 95959 zip code.
Really? Comcast.
Threats, so less threats were listed, which is pretty normal. I don't know, Councilmember Peterson, if you've seen this in other strategic planning that you've done, but all the ones I've done, people are usually really good at identifying weaknesses. And they're usually pretty close to that with strengths. Opportunities, not so much, but once they get on a roll, they can just kind of put them out there, right? Because once you kind of have that mindset. Threats are a little bit more difficult, so commonly this list is shorter. And it's because it's outside of your control. So thinking about the things that are outside of your control is not something we do very often.
It's the least visible.
Yes.
It's the least visible because you have to be sort of inside baseball to get what some of these weaknesses are.
Yes. So you see PG&E again in there. You know, some of the obvious ones, vacant courthouse building, loss of the courthouse, you know, lose water rights, lose local control on housing. And then there's ones that are, you know, again, you don't have to agree with this. These, you can have differing opinions all within the same category. So for example, a threat here is overspending on police. But somebody else said a strength is our police department. So those seem like they're mutually exclusive, and they are, but they probably didn't come from the same person, so that's okay. But many of these overlap, again, what people recommend. So on the SWOT analysis, always my recommendation that you would consider adopting this essentially as written or asking me to put it into the draft strategic plan, but that every time you touch the strategic plan, we make sure that things that we're working on globally match what's in our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Because if they don't, then we're going to get out of balance. So if 5 years from now we update our strategic plan or create a new one, and everybody's take on what the strengths and weaknesses are vastly different than what we have written down, it'll mean that the goals and objectives that we wrote aren't valid anymore. So this is a bellwether, so to speak, for measuring your initiatives, goals, and objectives.
Make a comment.
Sure.
I'm asking, you know, so.
It's on.
Jump in.
It's on.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, I know, I'm such a wallflower. No, I was just going to say that, you know, given that these really come from the community, and this is actually a very good list. There's a lot of thought that went into this, and it's, I don't think it's appropriate for us to be sitting here picking and choosing about which ones are in and out, because was a very rich process of doing this. And I absolutely go with where Sean's going. If we decide to work on something, we just need to understand through the SWOT analysis, where the impacts are that we're having. So, but I would support the adopt as written and review in the draft plan, because it'll be there for us to look at again. And we don't want to be monkeying with this language much at all, I think.
I second that.
Awesome.
Food trucks are an opportunity. I love that.
And I would imagine there's some people that would say that that's a threat.
That's a
or
threat.
you
If
know,
you've ever eaten off of a
so,
bad food truck, you might see that as a threat.
Yeah, it depends. It could be a threat to your GI system.
Depends on where they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, you know, because we're not going to sit here and pick and choose and add, and so then what, you put it in a draft plan and then we mark it up? Sean?
yes, sorry.
That's all right.
Exactly. And certainly could consider in the draft plan refining them and
We'd do that in another session.
yeah, and like right off the bat, Vice Mayor Fernandez noted that I put Public Works twice in
I saw
strengths.
that.
So, so there, you know, obviously I didn't count that multiple times and only write it down once. So,
Put in twice.
It is.
yeah, it's easier if it all came out of the, surveys. I have that in a spreadsheet, you know, right off the website. But the ones that happen in person, you know, we took, you know, hand notes on those, so. Yeah, so we would, all of these things we put into the draft strategic plan, and you could decide to change these at any time. But they're important. It seems like this first part is the unfun part, because it's not deciding what we're going to do. But it is essential that we review who we are, where we want to be, the values that we hold unique to our community, and what our stakeholders suggest are strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats before we, jump into what we actually want to do. Otherwise, you not only run the risk, you almost guarantee that you will create solutions in search of problems. Because they're just a list of things that people want to do, not a list of things that need to be done. On that item, issues, initiatives, goals, objectives, and tasks. So this is the more fun part of the meeting.
Promise.
I make no promises. The strategic plan, many people have done strategic planning in a business. I have one for my household. Yes, so my kids are,
Yeah, because you have
the
27
stakeholders,
people in
and
your home.
we have, we call it Gracelandlandia, so they're, it's, and we have the mission statement on the wall and the whole
I
thing,
love that.
right?
I love that.
Ours is really easy, right? Vanessa and I just want our kids' lives to be, incrementally better than ours were, and hopefully they'll do the same. And you can write that down pretty easily, but when you come to cities, you're talking about a ton of things, right? So the Chamber of Commerce recently did a strategic planning process, and they did a survey, and then they did one day in the room, and they write it all down on the board, and they put it in, and they write it up, and they review the draft, and then they approve the final one. And that works, but when you're talking about such broad things, and when you really want a lot of stakeholder input, this process tends to work better where we gather a whole bunch of input. It can be all over the place. We put it into broad categories. You ask that we take those broad categories, and then in many cases ask that we go back to the community to bring more granularity to those broad categories. So instead of you tonight coming up with every single thing that we're going to work on, you come up with the broad categories, get more input from the community on what we work on, and we just kind of squeeze everything eventually into the box. It is more work, and it is more time for you, but it's much better at representing the needs of the community rather than guessing. So ultimately, obviously, it's the council's decision and discretion to put whatever you want in there, and you have probably a much better ear to the community than I do in my short 6-month time being back. But nonetheless, I think that we found that people were willing to give input, and I think that they would be willing to give more input. And the nice part as we move forward with these is the next round, we just ask them to give input on the things that they actually care about. So somebody that cares about fire might want to come to your fire committee and give some input, but somebody that doesn't care, they want to just come to your parking committee and, give input or things like that. So, additional opportunities in the future. So, but for those at home, for those in the audience, strategic initiatives, broad categories of effort or fields of work, usually represented in a few words, maybe one word, and easily understood in that context. Goals are narrower categories, and they're generally seen as an achievement or an accomplishment, something that could be done, like literally score a goal. The strategic initiative is play the game, the goal is score a goal, but not a ton of detail beyond that. And so tonight, largely you'll be dealing with strategic initiatives. Those are the broad things, but you may have some goals in there. Objectives is the next layer down. They're specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-sensitive, or what we call SMART objectives. You may have some of those too. Those are more often created, as we refine the plan, and sometimes not created at all until, something comes up that necessitates them. And then the tasks are the things that staff is going to do to meet those objectives, to achieve the goals, to address the strategic initiatives. So again, those are the categories, but tonight you're largely dealing with strategic initiatives. So I used an analogy of a map, that the strategic plan is a roadmap to our future. Strategic plan, it would be a map of all of Nevada City. The initiatives would be an area like the downtown. Goals would be a block on the street. And then objectives would be detail like 317 Broad Street. So it takes you from the very big map of the whole city all the way down to right here at City Hall.
And then what would the tasks be attached to that?
Tasks would be like,
Clean
go
the
close the door,
door, yeah,
clean the
yeah,
bathroom.
yeah,
An example from our current structure of our interim strategic initiatives, we have a strategic initiative to improve our infrastructure. A goal under that initiative is to improve citywide infrastructure with an emphasis on increased parking. That's council language, not my language. That's an initiative and a goal that exists. So an objective under that goal might be to increase the available parking in both the downtown and the Seven Hills district to meet the recurring peak parking demand by July 1st of 2025. So that'd be specific, measurable,
Time-bound.
attainable, realistic. In other words, it can be done and time-bound.
I can do it.
And then a task might be, in next year's budget, you might see a task under the finance department to secure a grant or general funds to construct the required parking, or you might see something under Public Works to stripe the newly created parking. So those tasks will be delineated in budgets, and they'll flow back upwards to accomplishing the strategic plan. The first question we asked on issues, initiatives, goals, objectives, and tasks, and we only asked 2 questions, is what is your number 1 priority for the city to work on over the next 5 years?
Housing.
So this is the top 10 number 1 action items. And the reason why we asked it this way is because usually things change. Between what's your number 1 and what's your list. So, like, what's my list of 7 kids versus what's my favorite kid? And I'm never going to tell you that Lennox is my favorite kid, but,
That's messed up. Huh?
I just said I would never tell you that. Hi, Lennox. This list, and can you see it on the screen? In the audience, I know it's, sometimes hard. So the pie chart is just reflecting the top 10.
Yeah.
It's not the whole thing, but if you look at it, housing, is about a quarter of the respondents' top 10s, top 10 response,
Fire safety,
right?
That's wild.
And then fire safety, and then business support. So those 3 make up about 50% of the top 10
Wow.
respondents. So housing, fire safety, business support. Climate adaptation, water resiliency, recreation, parking, street repair, historic preservation, and internet and cell coverage, the remainder of your top 10. So these are all of the top 10s with their counts. And this doesn't include the numbers of the ones we got today, but the percentages are relatively similar. So after you got to internet and cell coverage, your top 10, next after that is vibrancy.
I don't know what that means.
Vibrancy,
It's pretty broad.
it is very broad. So when described at the workshops and by other people in the words that they used, first of all, I only put it in this category if they used the word vibrant or vibrancy. So, because like you, I needed to get a thesaurus to know for sure what I was talking about, but when people were mentioning it in the workshop, it's that unique, joyful, small town, something about Nevada City that's different is what they were commonly referring to.
Alive.
Yes, and
Color.
Vital.
yes, and generally an aspirational statement, like they wanted it to be vibrant and that it's not as vibrant as they would like it to be, is what
I think that's
was
fair.
commonly portrayed.
I think that's fair.
Did she leave? Next is cannabis tourism.
Yay. Cannabis tourism.
Community well-being, we had both in the workshops and in the surveys, a lot of discussion or a lot of people put things about being a community and being involved with each other and taking care of each other. And I know it only says a count of 9, but that's still, that's significant. Policing, number 1 priority. After that, diversity, Nissan support, homeless, tourism, other. The only reason I put that is because they put other, and they wrote it down in their statement, like they put other, they put other things, or you should,
Seven people
some
put
stuff,
Do things.
but I don't want to not include their comments. Infrastructure, emergency preparedness, jobs. This will become important when we look at the next question. Safety, traffic, electrical resiliency, outdoor spaces, funding for services, walkability, and energy independence. Energy independence was clearly different than electrical resiliency in what people were writing. Those two came largely from the surveys. Energy independence started in the workshop, but people that put both, or commonly people put both as a descriptor. So that's your number 1s. But when you ask what other areas we be working on, like give me a list, everything we should be working on. Now look at this pie chart.
Wow.
Fire safety and housing is 50% of the responses.
Yeah.
So before, we were at housing, fire safety, business support. Now we're at fire safety, housing, business support. So the top 3 are still the same. They've changed order a little bit, but they're still there. The remainder of the list has been shaken up a little bit.
Yep.
And some things are there that weren't there before. Traffic, process for public art,
I love that.
highly commented on, but not in people's number 1. Jobs comes up here. Support for Seven Hills, improve city communications, commonly brought up, not in anyone's number 1. And that included a combination of our online presence, direct verbal communications with the community, comments on our newsletter, going to everyone. I don't think it was from you, 'cause I didn't see a survey from you, unless you used somebody else's name.
I did not.
Also, in the top 10 action areas, reduce smoking in the downtown.
Yeah.
Not in anybody's number 1, but in the top 10 of most
Yeah.
commonly things that we should be working on. And parking.
3 months, says Chief, 3 months.
So I want you to see it in both ways, because, it's important to understand that, like I said, I have 7 kids. I love all of them, but, there's only one number 1. So when people ask that question, I'll change it to Maddox now. Maddox is my number 1.
She's number 2. though. I mean, who else do you like? 'Cause this
Maddox
is-
and Linux?
Maddox and a Lennox, yep. The X's.
But wouldn't this be another kid, this question?
We can't ask that question.
So, but, for me, what it says is that, there's some existential issues, housing, fire, water, business support. And then there's stuff, okay, after we save ourselves from ourselves and build more housing, what else do we want to do? And it's not like, something that's, a critical threat. It's something, hey, when we do that thing that I really think we should do, and a lot of us think we should do, we should also do this other stuff. And I think that the first bucket is way up here, and the second bucket is just some general stuff here, But I think they're all important, so.
I always understood it as must-haves and nice-to-haves.
Should have, yeah, could have, yeah.
Nice to have.
Well, it's like hierarchy of needs, right?
Yeah,
It's
there
like
you go.
Maslow's. It's like fire and housing
Yeah, they-
are required
And
for
I-
us to look at, water, basic needs.
I'm actually surprised that it was this way. I've seen it been done both ways. The wants and needs, unfortunately, in surveys, people won't distinguish wants and needs in the fashion that we might distinguish wants and needs, and it can absolutely be done, and especially in focus groups and things like that. But I purposely didn't do it that way. I could be wrong, but, you know, it's a start. But many times, and we saw this in the workshop, people didn't bring up hot-button issues until late in the game. Because it was just, it's commonly accepted. So I'm actually surprised that those existential threats were marked so high, because commonly people will, they're just like, oh, it's just there.
I
you know.
have a theory about that. I thought a lot about that. I'm familiar with.
Wait, you have a theory?
I do.
Speaking to the microphone, sir, so folks at home can hear you.
I can be highly theoretical. No, it's interesting because I share the experience with you, and frequently, given the opportunity, what you'll most hear from people are their pet interests, their self-interest, that sort of, so you get, it sort of dissipates and you'll get hundreds of things. But this was really clear on these, there are 3 or 4 issues, maybe 5, that were absolutely rose to the top and were clear. And my theory on that is that there was a void in this community between the citizens and the administration, and that information was never, that question was never asked. What is it that you think we need in this community? So we had a pent-up demand for those questions to be asked. Plus, we're communicating these processes more clearly, so people came ready to answer, and I think that's why we got those really strong priorities.
And one of the things
That's my theory.
One of the things you said after both sessions, that you really remarked on the fact that people were just happy to be heard and wanted to participate in this process, you know, where they have been, to your point, shut out previously, you know, ostensibly shut out.
Well, it's one of the things that Sean touched on, and I sort of hold this for a bit, but the question of community, because we are a unique community, and when you talk to people that have been here all their lives, they will tell you that they're here because it's a real community, and that people engage and work at that level. And one of my really big takeaways, and I think this is what I consider a meta issue, which is one that should permeate all the things that we do, is how we bring our community into these processes and these conversations. Because this is the kind of community that wants that. The longing for belonging is everywhere, but this community was built on those kinds of connections, and the care that we take for each other and all of that. So I think that that's where that's coming from, and I think it's a big part of it.
And I think at its heart, like, that's what we're here for.
That's what we should be here
it-
for.
Exactly. And I think politics has gotten far away from that, so.
Yeah.
And then that sort of dovetails into our communication plan. You know, we need to communicate more effectively with our constituents and stakeholders.
And I like to point this out, and we've come so far so fast that a lot of people don't realize how much changes has been made, how many improvements have been made about communication and the responsiveness in staff. And it seems like a short amount of time, and people, you know, I still hear people complaining about the planning commission, even though it's a completely different planning commission.
I got that.
The completely different planning commission behaves completely differently, is really pretty functional, but they get tagged with the old behaviors. And there's a lot of that going on, and a lot of, partly is we've moved so fast, and it's, you know, this was major upheaval in a very short amount of time, really, by most standards, that people haven't caught on that there are really dramatic changes that have occurred in our community. And we are delivering services different, we're communicating better, we're delivering services better, and really, people should stop fighting with each other, because you don't have to fight with us anymore. You can come and talk to us, and we'll figure stuff out. So that's part of it for me.
Cool.
So if it's all right with you, I'd like to read and comment on the rest of the list, and then maybe see if the community members, either online or in the audience, might want to have their piece, and then see if we can get you to provide some thoughts on which of these might fit in the box, and several other questions that we'll come to. But, so fire safety was number 1, housing number 2, and that really encompassed a lot of areas, but when I tallied them up, over 80% of the ones that said housing said affordable housing. There was some other, things like make, ADU planning easier and things like that. But like I said, the majority of them said affordable housing in some fashion. Business support, I don't disagree in any way, is rarely high on strategic planning lists from stakeholder input.
Yeah.
And especially considering that you have 104 responses for business support. You did not have 104 business owners included in the workshops and the surveys. So that represents both your business owners, your community members, people that live outside the community, and visitors are indicating that support for businesses is an important
The chamber
item for the city.
pushed out a lot of surveys.
Could be. Stuart only filled out one. The traffic, I think that's a pretty commonly known one. Process for public art, I think that is contemporary. It's been on a lot of people's mind. And so it was good that it was captured here. Jobs, support for Seven Hills. Often those two went together, process for public art and support for Seven Hills were common dual entries. Improve city communications, reducing smoking downtown. Parking, which would probably always be on any survey in this city, surprisingly low, but I think probably because of the existential nature of some of the ones at the top. Infrastructure, recreation, including parks and recreation and services. Code enforcement, mostly those were do more code enforcement. Enforce short-term rental rules.
Yep.
Homeless, and that encompassed a number of things, both the impact on homeless persons on the community and its services, and the services and care that the community provides for homeless. So it's both components there. Emergency preparedness, separate from fire. Safety, that was revolving around feeling safe within the community. So that wasn't like put a reflective stripe on a railing. Those were largely, wanting to feel safe or more protected or,
From public safety issues or, natural hazards or?
From each other, from the community, and protected by the police department would be the largely,
Okay.
wanting to, feel safe. Tourism, funding for services, I was actually really surprised about that one. That's almost never on the list. But maybe that is because for a long time in the city, we've said we don't have money for that, we're not doing it. And so people are saying, well, then go find some money and do what I want you to do. That's just a guess, of course. Electrical resiliency,
I love that.
water resiliency.
Right.
That is, in many communities, strangely, it's low on the list here. In many communities, it's very high, especially with the drought that we've had. But I think people take for granted that water in almost every part of this town is just, it's always running. We do have a small place, Brian, right, where we have to turn on the generator when the power goes out to make sure that we pump enough pressure up the hill. But otherwise, water pretty much flows in this town all the time. Electricity, internet, not so much. That would explain potentially why it was so low. Climate adaptation, that was something we heard in the workshops a lot. Responding to climate change. And we do not have a climate adaptation or resiliency plan in the city. That was also noted. Sidewalk repair and street repair, two separate things, commonly responded to by the same, in the same responses, but clearly two different things. Nissan support, historic preservation, internet and cell coverage, vibrancy, again, that word that we talked about before, outdoor spaces,
Yay,
cannabis tourism,
yay,
community well-being,
yay.
and like we talked about before, policing, and those were all 9 of them. They were all different, but I think essentially they were all aspirational. We want the police to be more engaged with us. They were positive. We want more policing. They weren't saying we want more enforcement. They were saying we want more
Engagement.
community-oriented policing or engagement.
Cops.
Exactly.
Doing it.
Energy independence, walkability, and diversity. That was the balance of your list. So, and there was no other in there, like there was in number ones.
People knew.
So, public comment maybe, if we have any folks online or in the audience that want to champion what their survey said.
Yeah, I think
or-
we have some public comment in the room. Come on down, Ms. Gamzon.
Good evening, Council. Hi, my name is Diana Gamzon, and I'm a resident here in the city limits. I also run a nonprofit here on Broad Street, so I work here too. And I'm the executive director of the Nevada County Cannabis Alliance. We are a trade association that represents the local licensed cannabis industry. And we provide education to the industry as well as advocacy. And our values are steeped in craft cannabis farming, environmental sustainability, and environmental stewardship and economic development. And as a resident of our great city of Nevada City, I attended the strategic sessions. I was one of the louder voices when it came to the word vibrancy. So I'm going to wear my resident's hat and talk about why that was so important to me. And vibrancy, maintaining and continuing to take actions related to policy that help support vibrancy in our town is truly the number one important thing to me. It is that feeling that tourists feel when they are here, our visitors, and it's that feeling that all of us that live downtown love about living downtown. It is the character of downtown, what we physically see. It is what we hear, or what I hear on a hot summer night and hearing music coming out of different places or outside of Golden Era. It's dining outside, it's new restaurants that open up, or the excitement of what's going to be coming, and all of our cultural offerings. It's all of those things. And why it is so important now more than ever is because in the upcoming, it might be next year, the following year, we're going to be getting a Roseville style of shopping center up in Grass Valley, and there's plans for courtyard and other stuff, and so there's going to be pulls, and we need to make sure that our business districts, both in Seven Hills and downtown, that we are continuing to help support the vibrancy that we have here. So it's sort of encapsulating many different things. So vibrancy. Now I'll put on my Cannabis Alliance hat. And I do believe that in this upcoming year, we have a very strong opportunity at the intersection of tourism, supporting our local businesses, and taking our cannabis industry that has already contributed, last I checked, over $1.5 million. It's probably close to $2 million in tax revenue so far, and help support cannabis tourism. And I have some data to share. So the MRI Simons USA, which is a national study, or is a national association that studies American consumer behaviors, has done many different studies in the past couple years on cannabis consumers' behaviors. And what they have found is that the cannabis tourist is an active leisure travel audience, or travel tourist. The cannabis-motivated audience is self-described as foodie, a wine enthusiast, and a luxury traveler. And that is in alignment with our local cannabis industry here. We are a craft cannabis industry that focuses on wellness, and that's exactly what there's great opportunities with cannabis tourism. 37% of this audience will decide where to go based on access to cannabis. The majority of this audience are Gen Z and millennials. By 2025, 50% of all travelers in the U.S. will be millennials. So it matters to these travelers that they have access to a dispensary and a retail shop. This study also found that for every dollar spent at a cannabis retail shop, an additional 2.8 cents is injected into the local economy. And so, you will hear me say this, that 100% we support the downtown smoking ban. And just as we don't have people out on the streets drinking wine or, drinking. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for cannabis tourism here in our little city. And I will end by saying there's a big event in Santa Rosa that happens once a year. It's a cannabis educational workshops as well as a award ceremony. In the month of December, which is of course the rainy shoulder season, brings in $17 to $20 million a year in economic impact to Santa Rosa. So I definitely think this is something that we should look seriously into and explore opportunities. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Diana. All right, is there any other public comment in the room? Anybody online, Gabby? Nobody's, no burning desires? Okay, bring it back to Sean.
All right. So what are you doing tonight? So we can't do everything all at once. I put this in there because it's true. You will bite off more than you can chew tonight. That's okay. I don't want to narrow what you believe are the broad areas that the community should be working on. The process will naturally squeeze that into actionable items, remembering this is going to be a 5-year strategic plan that, is flexible and adaptable. But, these are really the things that either need to be accomplished in 5 years or need to start now so that they can be accomplished whenever they need to be accomplished. But if we don't start them now, we'll never get them started, kind of thing. And so you don't have to go with what the community said, but I think you see that there's broad support for many topics. So basically looking for that broad level, that strategic initiative level, and then we will refine it in the draft strategic plan that we'll bring back to you. And then it'll be refined further, I hope, with committees and the community, giving additional feedback to create goals and objectives within the strategic initiatives. We'll refine it again in the final document, and then, over the 5 years of the process. So it will change.
Well, housing is obviously number one with a bullet. And so, we should definitely start, we've been trying to talk about housing for a long time, so let's have that conversation and see what we need to do. One of the things that we've sort of talked about already is having Councilwoman Fernandez and Councilman Peterson doing a, public engagement workshop. But how do we, so we have to do the strategic initiative, right? So let's just frame that first, right?
And I think so many of these are connected, right? It's like an ecosystem, the whole thing is. And so when we're talking about housing, we're also talking about potential revitalization of the Seven Hills District. We're also talking about enforcing short-term rental rules. All of these things are going to contribute to housing. And so, so much of it can be lumped together.
Art and culture.
It'll have an impact on homelessness
Do
as
we
well.
not already have a housing committee?
You have an external housing committee for the housing authority.
For the trust, the housing trust, right?
Yes, but it certainly could also be an internal one. So let me get through, with your indulgence, a couple of these things. Something to think about is you can recommend strategic initiatives, which can just be those things: housing, fire, whatever it is. You could also recommend embedded initiatives, and what I mean by that is, I give you 3 examples here. Homelessness is not directly within the city's purview. In other words, the funding for the care, mental health, behavioral health, and the like for homeless is a county function. But certainly, there are people at risk for homelessness in our community that we would like to support and find ways that they don't become homeless. There are homeless people in our community that we would like to support and bring those resources to them. And there's also homeless people in our community that have adverse impact to others in our community, our businesses and the like. And so an embedded initiative would look like, instead of having a strategic initiative for homelessness, for example, with goals and objectives, an embedded initiative would say, include the services or care that can be provided to our unhoused, and an assessment of the impact of our unhoused on our community in our other initiatives or goals. So in other words, where we have policing, we would just embed in that they will report on their actions with regard to sharing services with the unhoused community, as well as the impacts. Where it's fire, same thing, because homeless people sometimes light fires, and that can be a threat to the community. Similarly, they can be at risk because they're out in, the at-risk areas. If there was a fire, we might not be able to get to them, so we might want to have programs to get them out. That may not be its own initiative. It may be that something that you embed in everything else that we do that touches it. Or embedded activities can be things that are essentially partnerships. Tourism and cannabis tourism, for example, you have the Cannabis Alliance, you have the Chamber of Commerce, so you may not actually have its own standing initiative, but it might show up in a goal or an objective in some other initiative to partner with or participate in.
It makes sense to me that falls into business support as well.
So exactly, they can be.
Definitely.
So that's where you can have, to your point earlier, Vice Mayor, is that it may not be that you might have multiple strategic initiatives that align, and you could have 10 of them all in a row, although I don't know that we can accomplish 10 things, but you might have 5 and one of them has 2 or 3 ones under them because you're considering those items. Just food for thought, and there's no wrong answer tonight because we're not locking anything in. And I'd like to share that essentially after you say, here's the ones that we'd like you to work on, I'm going to ask you to also consider on those, if you would like to tonight, say which one of them might benefit from taking an existing committee and having that committee do a workshop with the community to get stakeholder input on that specific area, like fire exists, like parking exists, if that was, one of your strategic initiatives, or a new committee, like housing exists, but not really for this purpose. So, would you use that, or would you appoint a new committee? Or maybe it's a staff level thing where you say, hey, it's not a council level or committee level thing, but staff should solicit input from the community. And so I will, after we get through the ones that you pick, ask you to kind of opine on those, and then we have a couple questions after that. But I will put the list back up of all the items that people went through, and then this is the free-for-all time. No, just kidding. But this is the, what is the council's top 10 or top 5, and is there consensus in that? And then it'll be my job to squeeze that into the box for the draft.
Okay.
Light question. Once we select our strategic initiatives, is there a space then for the community to react to our selection in the process?
Yeah, so
Yep.
absolutely, and that's where the draft strategic plan
Got
is going to have them all laid out and goals that are already established. And then as committees meet and create more goals or more objectives, those get, lumped in. And so they can react to the draft, they can react to the final. And even if you adopt it and then a week later it's, oh my gosh, we missed a piece, that's, can always be included. And we'll create a process. You won't be doing it every council meeting, don't worry about that. But we'll create a process where you'll review pieces and parts of the strategic plan at regular intervals and solicit additional community input, and where you're getting reports on the performance. Once we get around the next budget year, right, and we have tasks within the budget or objectives within the budget to address the goals and strategic initiatives, then you're going to get, in staff reports, you're going to see that this action is, done to meet, task 1 of objective 2 of, goal number 7 of the strategic initiative of fire safety. So that there's a way to keep track.
All right, yeah.
It all ties it together.
Got it.
You won't want to read all that, but that's where you'll be able to look anytime and see where we are
Okay.
at doing the work. But that's
Remember how you
not
said we could
tonight.
get through this really quick if we stopped talking so much?
I don't think you said we previously. I think you said me. Dean left, so.
I think that's what she said.
So yes, so the list is back up on the screen,
And I appreciate you.
and yes. I always,
That's the other list, right? Aren't there two
That's the
lists?
second list, but it's
Yeah,
more
this-
robust list.
yeah, this is, so not people number one, this is things
Just
that.
everything.
Just everything.
Yeah.
The top three are the same, just in a different order.
Mayor, how would you like to do this?
Well, why don't we just shout out things and like put our hands and, no, but look, so the first is housing. I mean, is there any disagreement that housing should be our top priority amongst the council? I mean, fire,
I disagree. I think fire should be our top priority.
okay. Anybody think that fire should be our top priority?
I think those are the top two priorities.
Okay, thank
How's
you.
that for wishy-washy?
I don't think that we have to categorize, do we have to? Do we
I
have
don't think so
to?
either.
No, they're just top, we're going to go top five?
Yeah.
Top five, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so, agreed. So I would, first, second, it doesn't really matter, fire and housing. Then three is a little harder, so let's get into three. What do we think?
Water.
I would also agree with water.
Yeah, I'm surprised it's so low on this list.
It's because most people don't
Water
understand.
guy.
No, it's really true, it's really true. I found this,
Understand the potential problem.
yeah, no, when I
think
was,
that's-
when I was,
yeah,
when I
yeah,
came to town, started working and stuff, and I was looking at the water situation and learning how it worked and stuff, and I was campaigning, and I found that there was no one in town that believed that there was any problems with water sustainability over time. And it's as Sean described, you learn this as a public works director. Your two big jobs are moving liquids into a house and moving liquids out of a house, and nobody cares as long as it happens.
Right.
I have to move some liquids, actually.
Yeah, the minute it
Oh,
stops.
yes.
Taking a bio? Yeah, let's take a 5-minute bio break.
We'll just talk about
Talking
water.
about
Dean's
water,
back,
sorry,
let's take a
Dean.
break.
All right, we'll adjourn it.
See, I set that up for you, Danielle.
working.
That shouldn't be a strategic
We're
initiative,
already working on it.
because it's something that we're going to do, right? Code
But how do I know
enforcement.
that? How do I know that? I mean, so if it's not in the plan, I mean, this is where it gets tricky. Okay, we are doing it, because.
I know that because I'm on a committee
But I
and
think
we're
it should be
taking
a strategic
steps.
focus. And so you're saying, oh, don't worry about it, it is.
But, so we.
But we can only have so
talked
many.
about this a little bit, so maybe, yeah, but that's also another thing that, sometimes in the committee, we don't bubble up what's going on. And that happened a lot before, but I think we're a little better about it. So can you guys tell them what you're doing? So
Now, you don't have to tell me right now, I just need to know what's happening.
it's
It
happening.
is, it's
And that's a
happening.
perfect point, and I apologize for that. What I mean in general terms is that, for example, a process for public art is not so broad of a topic to,
But a
you know,
strategic initiative.
or you could just direct that, we evaluate that to be, accomplished in a certain amount of time. And, we could include that in the strategic plan, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a strategic initiative. Or I'm trying to, see what other ones would be. Even, if parking doesn't make your top 5, that doesn't mean that it's not important. It doesn't mean we won't do anything with it. You certainly can provide
Like,
direction to work
reading
on
my
parking.
mind and taking these things out and shooting them down before I even speak?
So that's what I mean is by picking things tonight, that doesn't mean you're excluding the other ones. You certainly have the opportunity or to direct staff to work on the other ones as, as items. Exactly, yep.
I have a
I'll get
question.
back to you.
Both Sean and you have mentioned, Doug have mentioned 5. Are we limited to 5?
I was just saying, top.
Yeah,
So I think a
No.
statement that Sean made earlier and something that
5 is not enough.
that 10 is too many.
Yep.
right? That's a lot of stuff to do, so top 5, and then maybe we have a second 5 or something, I don't know. It's up to you guys.
If you could come to consensus on a top 10, that would be fine. Just knowing that, you're, and that we would need to whittle some of that back of what is, truly your priority strategic
Yep.
initiatives. But again, like I said, I don't want to limit you tonight. So if 5's not enough, and 10 is too much, if you end up somewhere between 5 and 10, that's fine. We'll just keep squeezing it into the box.
So let's just go through them. We got
Okay.
fire housing somewhere in the top 2. What's 3?
Water.
We've heard water from 3 people? I'm agreeing with Daniela that I think business support is more important than water, just because not.
I'm not really ranking to say what's more important.
They should both be in the
but-
top 5. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, that's it, because you can't have much of a
Yeah.
business if you don't have water,
Yeah,
no matter how you slice it.
But there's only so much we can do about water.
and I just want to name that one of my top priorities is always going to be supporting the Nisanan. We read this acknowledgement at the beginning of every meeting where we say that we are going to support the tribe in their efforts to stabilize their people as well as their campaign to restore tribal sovereignty through federal recognition. They are actively a tribe in crisis. Their elders are getting older. They are more vulnerable. There is a lot of struggle within the tribe right now, and I would really like to see us prioritize, because I think this is part of our historic preservation as well. This is historic preservation. This is the original people, and I'd hate for something like this to go as mere, words that we kind of throw on the beginning of each meeting.
We have a diverse history. We have the Nisenan, we have the Chinese that came and went. We have the European settlers, some of whom are still here. Perhaps
Over
we can-
500 black people here between 1850 and 1900. Linda Jack's done great research on that.
Alexander, yeah. So,
So we got fire, housing, business support, and water. Top 4. What else is top 5? Not necessarily, it is on. Nobody can hear me though.
Sean did say we would bite off more than we can chew, so let's narrow it down to 50 things, I think.
There we go. There we go. It started working. It wasn't plugged in. All right. So we got 4, what's 5?
Well,
Nisanon, yeah.
But,
I think that's top
so-
10 for me, but
It's certainly top 10 for me, but I can't, so there's a huge infrastructure beast out there, whether it's sewer, water, roads, sidewalks, however you look at that. It's an old town with a lot of old infrastructure, break a water line, you can lose $1 million like that these days. So, there's something about it that needs to be in there, whether it happens at the staff level and we're informed, but I just think that
I agree with you,
It's a
and,
big deal.
and I think that just based on what I'm doing for my profession, we're tracking all the infrastructure money coming out of Washington and Sacramento. There are buckets of money for infrastructure, and we need to be ready
that's
to
what they
write
keep
grants.
saying.
No, I know, so that, for me, so, it's not my self-interest, but grant writing to solve all these problems, we need funding, right? So we need funding for fire, for housing, for business support, for water, for all these things needs money, right?
Yeah, and-
We don't have a lot.
And I have to say that the one thing that really surprised me is how little funding and finance showed up in these, because most of these are heavy dollars. Most of these are heavy dollars, and
Everything.
and we've only just learned how much money we have as a city. We barely know that. We're doing okay, but every one of these comes with a huge price tag, and we are leaving money on the table that we need to think about.
I am wondering if a strategic goal of vibrancy could include things like recognition of our diverse cultural and historical background and our arts programs.
You could put a lot under vibrancy, I think. That's a good point, Lou.
I also think climate adaptation, I think every single thing we do at the city level should be considering the future of climates and sustainability. I think that, and I don't know if that's a climate adaptation plan or what that means, but I think that should just be baked into every single process and decision that we make.
What did you call this, nested goal or
That's
something?
an
Embedded,
embedded.
yeah.
You call them embedded, I call them meta goal, because I feel the same way about climate change, community engagement, and technology. Because, everything that we do, we should be looking at how to technologically advance that as well, engage our community, and do it in a way that's sustainable and acknowledges the responsibility that we have to address climate change.
Yeah.
100%.
Embed them suckers.
I like nested, though, that's good.
All right, any other, anybody want to take another topic? I don't know whether this is part of tourism, but cannabis tourism, not necessarily cannabis tourism, but the cannabis industry, such as it is, that's something that's been very helpful to our city. And, there is some low-hanging fruit there, so I think that's something that's important in my priorities, so I'm going to put
I
it.
agree.
Separate from business support?
Yeah, it'd be under that umbrella, but as a major part, right?
Yeah, I think it is, because, what businesses need is, they all, even the cannabis businesses need support in making more profit.
Cannabis is more of an industry, I feel like.
Yeah.
And they're a large part of why we are still a city today, going through COVID.
Yeah.
When Diana says that 1.5 million, or that is nearly 2 million now, that's very real. We very much benefited from that. I'd like to see us support those efforts.
Especially as we're going to have some competition with our neighboring city.
Good point.
Well, there'll be a little bit.
So do you want it to be business and industry support as a single initiative that has multiple goals to address cannabis and?
There you go.
Or do you want?
That looks good. That looks good.
I wonder if it can be a tourism goal, because tourism is so much about our local economy. So much of our local economy is based around tourism, and that cannabis tourism is a facet of that. Just an option.
I think tourism, well, you could do business support, and tourism supports businesses, and
Right.
cannabis business supports, some, I think what you said first, business and industry support, and then that goes down, and then we could have another one, well, that's also business support too, so, I don't know.
They're all tied.
They're all, yeah.
So is the Seven Hills thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's another one that's, I think, because also, you remember, council, that we have some ARPA funding. So we have, some of this is going to be prioritized in the next budget cycle, and we'll attach funding directly to that. But now we have a little bit of money, discretionary spending, that we can put towards some of these initiatives. And, where it makes sense. Do we need to do a housing study? Do we need to update our housing? Oh, I don't know, update the housing. I wouldn't even say that. But
It is up to date.
I know.
And that's your next question. That'll, after you opine on these, and we have some overarching ones, we have some embedded ones, and then you talk about how you think that might come out to committees. We'll talk about the ARPA funds as well. And if you would like to consider projects related to these,
So far, we have 6, right?
And so what do you have?
We got water, housing, fire, business support, industry support, cannabis, maybe under that, actually, that might go under, no, I guess cannabis is out and that goes to industry support. And then there's something under that, and then Nisanon. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 so far.
I'd like to broaden the Neeson one to
Okay.
include diversity, cultural vibrancy, whatever you want to call it.
That's good. And then put
I
Nisanon.
don't want to, I'm not saying that we shouldn't also focus on that, but I also don't want to dilute the specific support for them, which in a way we're already doing. We have a new committee, right? There's a new Nisanon liaison being appointed, that has been appointed, excuse me. And so I hear you, and I worry that of lumping them with too much, that it becomes about other things, when really I would like for us to singularly focus on them, personally.
Gary?
With all due respect, and I get it, and I understand what you're saying, and I support what you're saying, but it's a very narrow sliver when you look at the big piece. I know how important it is, and I'm not trying to diminish it in any way, shape, or form. But, I could get that way about water, I could get that way about parking, which are different topics. One of the questions for all of this is, what's the right level? So if you want to give the Nisanon the full focus of the strategic plan, just like water's getting, or fire, or housing, it can be done. Or is there a bigger, broader category that Lou is sort of arguing for? So I don't know. I just know that it's a narrow topic.
Yeah, but I don't see that fire and water and housing and all of these things are going to get the same level of attention. I mean, they're all going to have different goals. They're all going to have different tasks. They're all going to have, and so for me, I would just like for this lane to be specific and narrow. It doesn't have to get all the cities, as much as the city's resources as fire and water, nor does it require that much. I just don't want them to be diluted by other things.
Well, maybe we make it a priority that goes down a little lower and just keep them separate, and then do a diversity and inclusion and,
That sounds good to me.
What does diversity mean? I mean, say more about that. Say more about what you're thinking for that.
I'm thinking about the things that encourage people to do and come here because there are so many different things to do. Different arts, different performances, and different cultural events, a wide variety of religious establishments, a diversity of cuisines, all of those things that just make us, as we discussed earlier, vibrant.
Yeah, I don't think we're an extremely diverse community. I think there's a lot of ways that we're lacking in diversity, including food. And I think that, I hear what you're saying about there's diversity in artistic offerings and religious groups. I think most communities have all the same religious groups. I think that when we call our community diverse, it gets a little muddled and confusing.
Oh, I'm not saying we are diverse. I think it should be a strategic goal to be diverse.
But see, then I wonder how we
can't
achieve
do
that
that,
goal.
exactly.
You know, we're going to import a whole bunch of, minorities to come in here.
Florida
and, you know.
governor could fix this.
Yeah, and that's kind of,
Talk to
exactly, that's what I'm
DeSantis.
getting at. I don't know that that's a goal. I think diversity can't be a goal. I think,
That's an aspirational.
I think we create, if we want diversity to be the goal, I think we choose the safety piece, right? We choose the safety initiative, and we create a safe community for different kinds of people to feel like they can live and be here.
Well, certainly diversity can't be imposed, but it can be encouraged.
Definitely.
So if I could ask a question, just on, go back on the embedded, I had climate adaptation technology, and
Climate, yeah.
what was there a third one?
Yeah, community engagement.
Community,
Yeah, and Gary, do you imagine that, like, communications goes
Well,
into
yeah,
that?
yeah, of course, yes.
Great.
Communications is-
Awesome.
and that's something that's easier to focus on. I mean, there's real simple tasks or real direct tasks that you can, develop and achieve some, move the needle on communication or improving our communication, which is the goal. So communication, I like that. Do we have any other thoughts on communication, Adam or Lou?
Something I'm always hearing that we could do better at, so prioritizing it would be a good idea.
Okay.
So a lot of times the way those look, and you don't have to do it this way, but I just want to get your feedback as we craft the draft strategic plan. You would have these embedded ones, you'd have statements before your strategic initiatives that say that, in all of our strategic initiatives, and specifically the goals, objectives, and tasks that are assigned within them, we consider, the impact of climate adaptation, or the impact of climate change, technology and how it can be used or leveraged to, improve the circumstances of these things, and how we engage and communicate with the community on these topics, so that they're kind of a pretext to everything else that we do, so that you might see climate adaptation as, embedded in a goal in one or more of the strategic initiatives. My question then, if that works for all of you, where are you putting Nisenan support as an initiative, as part of the vibrancy, as the number one embedded goal or number one embedded strategic initiative? So we always consider the Nissan, or did you not decide yet?
Yeah.
I like
I
the
didn't gather
embedded
it.
goal idea. I like the embedded. It's, kind of like the climate piece.
And kind of
It's
like, but exactly.
Exactly, it's baked in.
Yeah.
Like, they're baked in.
It is the most attention, in this hierarchy, it's the most attention you can get.
They'll be at the top of the page, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because it's the first thing you consider in anything that we do.
Yeah, how does this
You
impact?
guys, does that feel okay for folks?
I think that's great. I
Absolutely.
think
Yeah.
that's where it
Awesome.
should be.
Thanks for talking through it.
Yeah, good job. Okay, right, so that's an embedded goal?
Yep, so Nissan support, or just the Nissan in general, climate adaptation, technology, and community engagement / communications, which leaves us with housing, fire, water, business and industry support, which includes cannabis, and then the other one. What's the other one?
Infrastructure, which Gary
Well,
brought up, and that would include, I would assume, things like
That's what I'm
sidewalk
asking.
repair, street
What,
repair.
yeah, that's what I'm asking. What's the other ones you approved?
Well-
Infrastructure?
I need Parks and Rec to be in this list somewhere. So wherever we put that, it's got to be, prioritized, because I want to put a lot of,
Can you say more?
I could say a lot more.
Not too much. Just a
So,
little-
Were you ever shy?
Just a little taste,
Yeah,
a
yeah.
mission statement.
Well, with without trying to, freak out Dawn, I think, and there will be a lot of support for these initiatives. I think there's a bigger conversation around parks just in general. The
Skate
county has, what?
Skate park.
well, that's coming. That's coming. I want to talk about the big picture, the meta. So, I think we can talk about a park district. There's a possibility we could partner with North San Juan because they're disadvantaged. I'm thinking of grants. There's tons of money. So, including Hirschman's Pond, including Pioneer, and some other, of our green spaces into a park district for the benefit of driving some revenue and funding towards that. Some of the goals, and these are community-driven things that I've sort of adopted. One of them is an amphitheater. We had two citizens who wanted to do an amphitheater at Hirschman's, and then that sort of went away because of the mosquitoes and the wetlands. And then, so now there's another effort to do a bigger amphitheater over at the tech center, in between two of the buildings that the guys from Yali Bird own, and, that's sort of taking fruition. I don't know where it's going to go, but, we've had Music in the Mountains out there sung. We've had a lot of people look at it, and there's a lot of positive support for it and room out there. There's also a need, I think, for a skate park, since we've had two people injured in our town. A woman broke her wrist a year ago at Hot Summer Nights because a skateboard got away. Some guy over at Sale broke his leg when some skateboarders were doing some aggressive skating around him. I've talked to a lot of skaters. I've talked to a lot of business owners and the DA and this principal, and they say, if you can get these kids from grinding on our stairs and our rails, we'll support anything. So
I hear them on the tennis court.
When I told the Sale kids they could ask for the skate park, that's when they got excited about filling out the survey.
my kids too, the kids at Seven Hills too. So I just think we can, and whether it's a committee that sort of talks about this, I think that, as a community, obviously it's a priority for our residents. And, there's only so much Dawn can do by herself. She does a great job alone as a one-person division that's responsible for all that land. So I think that, putting some money towards Parks and Rec and providing some support for Dawn would be another priority for me.
I love this. I would totally support this, and I also want to remind folks that the county named Parks and Rec as one of their priorities.
Sure.
Just recently, and so I think that they would be, I imagine they could be eager to partner with us on some.
Yeah,
on some
and I've
things
already
as well.
talked to Erica Seward, who is their new Parks and Rec liaison, and we're meeting. We're supposed to meet today. We didn't, but we're going to meet soon. And just to talk about how the county can support us and, where there's some synergies and collective efforts that can, move the needle on some of these things. So I hope you
So
guys
we
would
are
support.
going for 10.
You want some help, Don?
I guess so. Well, no, we have embedded, so the embedded ones, do they count as numbers?
No, because they're
Yeah,
not their own.
They're embedded.
you
No,
know,
so then we don't have 10. We
So
have-
I'm going to ask a question. I shouldn't, it's late in the night, but, so Parks and Recreation as its own strategic initiative, or is that a subset of Vibrancy, which would be Parks, Recreation, Arts, and Culture?
No.
Okay,
Its own separate.
its own separate Parks and
me.
Rec.
But is it, I mean, just
Everything's
devil's
fine.
advocate here for a second, just thinking about amphitheater, thinking about arts and culture, thinking about like the potential overlap.
Sure.
I mean, it could be its own, I'm just asking.
This
So-
is also part of our infrastructure.
Yeah.
You're
you could-
talking physical plant for some of it.
Yeah. It doesn't matter to me as long as there's money and effort and energy put towards it.
Tell us the sort of real quick, the sort of, is there a benefit or a detriment to putting it separate or together necessarily?
This is entirely your item, so.
So the vibrancy thing has like 27 things in it now, right?
We have a.
So you have embedded, number one priority Nissan, climate adaptation, technology, and community engagement and communications, the things that we will address in everything that we do. And then strategic initiatives, you have housing, fire, water, business, industry support, which includes cannabis, infrastructure, which is parking, roads, all of that, parks and recreation. If you had vibrancy, so that's 6 right there. If you included vibrancy as your arts, culture, diversity, and I'm not sure what else you said, that would be 7.
Or we roll Park and Rec into vibrancy and consume the other items with that. Arts, arts, culture.
I mean, everything could go under vibrancy if you want.
I know, it's turning into a very big bucket.
I think Parks and Recs can stand on their own.
We need a very vibrant fire safety plan, so it goes under vibrancy.
Vibrant is the definition of the color of my shirt. Read the tag, it's vibrant lilac.
I have no intention of reading the tag.
Or wearing a lilac
Okay, so,
shirt.
what about historic preservation? No, just, sorry. No, I mean, we have plenty of that going on, so I think that's pretty good for right now.
So we need to resolve on Park and Rec, is it separate, and there is no vibrancy, or is there a vibrancy and a Park and Rec, or does Park and Rec fall under vibrancy?
How about vibrancy gets embedded? Like everything now, it doesn't work, it doesn't work there.
Yeah, that's the thing, it's so broad.
I'm open to anything. I can also just take all 7 and craft the vibrancy into something in your draft strategic plan, and if you want to keep
And
it,
then we
you
could
can. And
trim
if
it
you-
again at that point,
Exactly.
right?
It's
Yep.
all just a draft.
I like that idea.
Sure. All right, so then, are there anything else on here that we really need to prioritize or look at? Is there anything else that we have to say, oh, yeah, we gotta do that for anybody's thing? Obviously, street repair, sidewalk repair, that's important.
Infrastructure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, yeah, it fits into infrastructure in the 2 public works things, and that's, water resiliency is done. Funding for services, no. Short-term rental rules, we're doing that. Code enforcement, we're doing that. Emergency preparedness, that fits into fire.
That's kind of where I'd put that.
Yeah. Community well-being, that's vibrancy. Policing, we really have we've got some stuff with that. For the sake of, getting something done and not overwhelming staff, with too many things, I think this is a good start. Is there anybody who has anything on there that they can't live without, that you think the community can't live without? Do you think our voters are going to say, our constituents are going to say, hey, you didn't include that, how could you not do that?
Historic preservation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hear about that.
But what would we do with historic preservation?
It's vibrant.
We can put under vibrancy.
I mean, assisting the Nisanon any way we can is historic preservation.
There you go.
Version
Going
of
back.
historic
to-
preservation, yes.
Yeah, I think that they probably mean something different here.
Huh?
but,
What?
All right, so I think, Sean, you want to recap where we are, just so we all know?
Yeah.
And then we can do a final pass?
So embedded, and by that I mean these are the things that we would consider in any strategic initiative, goal, or objective. The first at the top of the list, number 1 priority would be the Nisanon. And then in no particular order after that, climate adaptation, technology, and community engagement / communications, those to be included in everything that we do. And that would leave your strategic initiatives as housing, fire, water, business, industry, support, cannabis, all those included, infrastructure, parking, roads, et cetera, parks and recreation, and the 7th being vibrancy under the arts, culture, diversity grouping. So that will be your 7 there. If that works, then I would ask that you just tell me, have a brief discussion on which of those you think that as a council you could create goals around, or which ones are going to require committee and community input, so to speak. So housing, for example, is very broad, has many things, everything from short-term rental enforcement to lease local to support of high-density homes or not support of high-density homes. It has a lot of things. So to me, that would be one that would be right for a new committee or the existing committee to be appointed to do that. Certainly in your purview to do any of it. You could just say, Sean, go do it. But if we could go through those 7 and you tell me which ones where you think a committee might be the best place for the community engagement to get additional information as you build the goals. So would housing be one that would be a committee? Okay?
I'd say so.
For sure.
Fire has an existing committee, we can put it there.
Yep.
Water does not have an existing committee,
Does now.
does now.
Gary?
Yeah, I think that
Out of
is,
that committee, I know who
yeah,
that is.
that one will probably be ultimately among your largest and greatest opportunity for infrastructure funding. And it overlaps our infrastructure items, and we have a lot of opportunity there with NID and the county and variety of things, so I think that's great. Business, industry, cannabis support, we already have the chamber committee, Councilmember Cece and Mr. Adam.
Please call me Mr. Adam.
Mr. Polo.
But is that the place where you want to engage all those, because now it's business, industry, is it still there? Because generally they engage with the chamber directly. This should probably be its own committee engaging with the community, although the chamber could help us with that. Leave it there for now.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
partnership eventually.
Yeah, I mean, because of the industry and the business thing, maybe there's an ad hoc that goes, under that, or a subcommittee.
I think you can see potential partners in that. I mean, if you're doing like the chamber with Diane, you get
Yeah.
your industry partners in there on that.
We say support the plan and they do the work. Oh, no. that's-
Yeah, we like that.
Yeah.
Infrastructure, we have a parking committee. We don't have a other infrastructure
Who's
committee.
the parking committee? Is that Gary and?
Gary and Lou.
Maybe that becomes the infrastructure committee, or,
You want to use the parking committee as a community
Streets and
input
sidewalks and,
for this purpose, one time for this purpose?
we
See how it
started,
goes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
and-
just so we don't have too many committees. There's
And
only
make
five.
Brian come to our
Right.
meetings.
Yeah, and really this would be, I would think, one meeting for the people that are interested in infrastructure to
figure
come
it
and
out.
talk to you directly about that, and then you create goals that, we plug into
They're
the
going to just
plan.
tell us about every pothole and every
Well,
cracked
that's okay,
sidewalk.
though.
And that's okay.
We
you
need
know.
to fix. Well,
We can,
It's only 2 square miles.
Parks and Rec,
Doing it for 20.
we don't have a Parks and Rec committee, we have a Noise at the Park committee. Which was not officially readopted, by the way. It is an ad hoc committee that exists.
The process still underway.
I think we do need a Parks and Rec committee, just to provide some support for our Parks and Rec director, and so that we don't put a lot of burden on that department.
And so many of, for example, housing will not be a one and done, right? It will be create goals and then continuing work. Fire is already existing, water won't be one and done. Business won't be one and done, but it's sharing those partnerships. Using the parking one for infrastructure may be one and done because it's just to create those goals. Parks and Recreation will be a new committee which will handle that business. Vibrancy, tell
Arts
me,
and culture.
tell me about that.
I think it's the Arts and Culture Committee.
I agree.
The existing
I
Arts and
agree.
Culture Committee.
I agree. I agree.
100%.
And all the things that were listed, whether it's, diversity or, all of those potential things.
And it fits into arts and culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't assign any directly to me or staff.
We haven't got to the rest of the list.
Historic
Everything else you're going to do.
just you wait.
Thank you.
Somebody's got to have it.
We're going to assign policing to Dan.
So now similar kind of question, but in the lines of the American Rescue Plan Act. So you have a little over $700,000 in there. Don't let the money be the item there, but, so strategic planning, I like to do it mid-budget because if I do it right around budget time, councils will ask me to spend money that needs to be spent on other budget items. But doing it now is good because the budget's set, there's not extra funds for you to spend. But it also creates a challenge for me to squeeze and find ways to embed this into next year's budget and do actionable things. We did not allocate the American Rescue Plan Act or ARPA monies in this year's budget. And we did that for a purpose because that money came to us to better the community. And what better way to better the community than for you to identify in the strategic planning process what things need to be accomplished right now. So you don't have to pick tonight, But let's run down that same list, and you tell me which ones may be worthy of projects. If you have certain projects, certainly let me know. And then we'll create a list or a menu of projects based on what you say tonight that could be considered when we look at the draft strategic plan. You could say, I want menu item 1, 7, and 19, or, you know, whatever the case may be. Or you could add additional ones at that point. But just looking for your feedback in where we might consider using the ARPA money. Examples, not saying do any of these.
So can I
But,
just,
yes,
I just don't want to pick projects out of thin air.
Yes.
That aren't justified by analysis, data, or study.
I'm with you.
Okay. Because there's a lot of things I'd like to have, like a skate park, without knowing whether a demand exists or not.
Well, I know that
It
there's a
does.
demand.
I believe it does, so prove it.
Functionally, that $700,000 goes very fast. It wouldn't build you escape. It won't do one of anything significant, but it can do a lot of little things to boost some of these things. So for example, I'm not saying you do any of these, but fire safety, you could have a rotating green waste dumpster program for fuels mitigation in the spring, example. Housing, you could support a lease local program for, you know, you could look at paving the Clark Street parking lot. You could look at funding a new parks master plan or amendment to our
All of
master
those
plan.
things you just said.
Seven Hills revitalization plan. Those are, you know, you could create a low-income utilities support program. There's you know, unlimited opportunity there, but I'm just looking for your thoughts on, of those priorities or of those strategic initiatives. Would you like me to look at programs that use ARPA funds to come back for your consideration in the draft strategic plan?
First, I think we need to just realize that this is a finite amount of money that we're not
Yes.
going to get again. I think we need to leverage this funding to bring us more money with grants or whatever we can do to leverage it. You know, so it can serve as a match for some grants. You know, I think the things that we need to do, to Gary's point, is some planning. You know, certainly planning around housing and what that's going to look like. Do we do a housing study, you know, something that's a, you know, sort of a housing action item? Where are our best places to build? What are our opportunities? I know we talk about the Seven Hills District, but, you know, I mean, I've driven around with Bill Falcone, and he shows me all the properties that we own, and so there's some other opportunities, I'm sure. So I don't know what that study looks like, since we have a housing, you know, update to our general plan, a housing element, but, you know, maybe it's something more tangible. What can we do short, you know, what is the best public-private partnership process to leverage somebody else's funding to help us build housing and retail and the things that we've been talking about?
Sean, all your examples include concrete physical things. Can this money also be used for studies?
Planning studies.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could say it's too much, we don't want to address it tonight, or we don't want to include in the strategic planning process. That's okay too. I'm not mandating that you spend this money, but if there is something that on your mind kickstarts any of these, that you would like us to flush out as potential projects for your future consideration, then that's what I'm looking for your feedback.
Well, since housing is our top priority, and one of the things that the community has asked us, you know, the most important thing the community has asked us to do, what can we put towards housing to help us, you know, have that conversation a little bit more intelligently? Is that a study of housing needs? I mean, we have a, you know, housing element, but, you know, we have some serious concern about workforce housing, affordable workforce housing. So what does that look like? And I'm asking that sort of rhetorical question, but do we need a feasibility study for a specific project? Do we need a general study for, you know, housing in the Seven Hills and Tech Center, you know, locations? I don't know.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
So,
All right. Gary?
So, okay, so looking at all this stuff, I mean, there's plenty of this stuff that not a dime should be spent before we decide where we're going and then decide what studies we need to do so we can get the studies, and I want to say that. But I also want to say that, you know, looking at the number of items that are on this list and to look at the, you know, look at it for return for investment, that I keep coming back to Seven Hills and a conceptual plan of some kind for that area, because it does take on housing, it takes on arts and culture. It presents an enormous
Recreation.
opportunity for our community that has not really been looked at. So it appeals to me as a way of touching many of these issues and interests.
I like it.
And, you know, I mean, it's certainly one of the things, and I've done this before, and we don't need to go into this level yet, but one of the things that I saw when we're looking at housing, when we're at the league and listening, and is that, you know, you build a pathway, the city can't afford to develop housing. You just can't. It's so expensive. But you built a pathway to that. And what El Cerritos did is just one example of a specific plan area, where you do a specific plan area, you identify the area, identify the opportunities, you identify where the lots could go, you look at it, you put it together. Ultimately, if you do it well, you do it right, you then do a programmatic EIR, and then developers come in, and you're on the way.
You have
So-
shovel-ready projects.
You can start moving on it, and that is a very logical way for us to progress with the thinking on this area. So I just think that there might be some kind of opportunity there in terms of lifting most of these things off that we can immediately and generating new revenues. This is very appealing to me.
I like it.
I like it.
I too like it.
Lou likes it too.
Hey, that's perfect.
Okay.
I would have to say, I've never presented to a council or a board or anyone and said, I have $700,000, and they're like, we're not really sure we want to spend it. But I really appreciate that, because that means that
Be thoughtful.
the effort, exactly, it will generate
It's
the
also,
most.
no one's ever said that to us before, so we don't have it.
It sounded sarcastic.
We're not buying it. So-
But that-
Sure you do.
That will be great, because it'll mean that it won't be off the cuff. It will be, you know, the best return on investment for the community. And I think what you'll find is that we will be able to have a balance of something like that and some smaller scale, you know, immediate action item, not immediate, but, you know, tangible things for the business community or for our residents, well thought out, well planned. And so I think that's great. And we'll continue to offer that, you know, there is opportunity for the use of those funds as we move through the process.
Yeah, because the other one I had was business support, whether, you know, how we look at grants, whether it's for parklets or
Right.
whether it's facade improvements or something, that we figure out how to do, like forgivable micro loans, you call them, or something like
Yeah.
that. Which is-
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how to get one of those from my bank, but it's
You're going to get one from the county.
forgivable micro loan?
They
Wow.
haven't.
Something else that comes up for me is, I'd like to see the city at some point become members of the Ancestral Homelands Reciprocity Program, which is the Nisenan program, to sort of, to support them, to be able to give monthly donations. There are a lot of businesses in town that do that. There's a lot of nonprofits in town, and particularly as we're making it a sort of embedded thing, we might want to consider, you know, each year we give the Film Festival X number of dollars and the Arts Council X number of dollars. We might want to consider, you know, investing in that annually or monthly.
I'm really interested in the lease local thing. I think we have a lot of housing that exists and doesn't need to be built that's going unused. A lot
Yeah.
of,
Sean and I were up in Truckee, and we did a tour. They spend a lot of money on it.
Yeah.
They have a lot of money. I didn't realize how much Truckee has, but they have a program where they will incentivize homeowners to rent out a room, it's something to a local, and it's a nice chunk of change.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's a good idea. You know, you could even, you know, dial it into certain, you know, industry sectors, restaurant workers, teachers, you know, police and fire.
It offers immediate options for immediately addressing a concern in the community.
Yeah.
And that's putting some money towards housing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea, Adam.
I'm really into that. If we can make it worth people's while to not Airbnb their houses and instead to house
I don't know
people.
if we have that much money. But, but there's some people who, you know, but there's some people here who might consider that when we, put it out there, if you have the proper marketing and do it. So I think that would be a direction to staff to look at the Truckee program to see how we can scale it down here, see what kind of dollar amounts are involved, and then we can make a decision as a council on, what we want to allocate.
And I would like to do that for what Gary mentioned before too, is supporting local businesses and whether it's the parklet support or however else we might be able to support them.
I don't know if we have
All right, we're through that one. All right, next steps.
Wow.
So,
Just go put it together and bring it back.
exactly. So we're here
No, but
tonight.
from a planning standpoint, what are the next?
We would intend to bring you back a draft strategic plan at your second meeting in October, unless you wanted to have a special meeting on the topic. If you did, maybe Halloween, right in here, we could all wear costumes. No? All right.
I do want us to look at having a Halloween parade next year.
Parade?
I used to have one. It used to be really fun.
I think we probably used to have a parade every other weekend.
I know, we're going
We
back
still
to.
do.
We don't do it, that's right.
Official parades.
So that would be the second meeting in October, for your review of the draft strategic plan.
Okay.
You'd provide comments, amendments, changes, the community may make changes, and then we would look to schedule community input meetings with those various committees in between here and the end of November, and so that we can keep feeding goals and objectives into the plan, and then ultimately look to have you adopt the strategic plan. It doesn't really matter which date it is. It could be the second meeting in November, which would be before Thanksgiving if you wanted to have that meeting. It could be the meeting in December, but in that time frame. And then ideally, we will, along the way, identify things that you want to use the American Rescue Plan Act money for. And it may be, it's not an all or nothing proposition. You might decide at the draft in the second meeting in October that you want to implement the local business forgivable loan program if you like what we present, and reserve the rest of the money for, planning and other things. Or you could take it all in one lump sum. That's all available to you. But we would begin working on those items, both the ARPA monies and just doing the work. But the lion's share of what you'll be able to see as the heavy lift of the strategic plan really comes when we adopt next year's budget. And that's where you'll see everything in the budget will have, lines that say, we're doing this because you've asked us to. Yes. Well, last year of this term, unless you don't want to run again. So that's kind of the timeline for how that marches out. And it can be, and don't worry if these aren't set in stone up for a reason. If we miss a mark, we don't hit the draft one in the second meeting in October because you have something more pressing, that's okay. This is not, it really is a process, not a project, and it really is, a roadmap, but we're never going to get to the very end, right? We're just going to do a new strategic planning session and extend the roadmap. So we'll
no
always
end.
be, exactly. It's not the Hotel California, but it's,
I don't want to make this too onerous, but if you could look into how we could leverage some of that money, what ability we have to turn that money into more money, or whether it's, I know you can't look through every grant and see what there is, but you could give us some general ideas of how to make that money work better for us.
Don't invest in crypto.
I could have put it all in crypto.
now better
It's
than
really down.
6 months ago.
I guess that's when you buy it.
Yeah, that was the time to buy. I'm buying tons of
So that is all I have for you. I really appreciate the
This is
input.
it.
I hope it was valuable for you. I would suggest that we maybe see if there's anybody else that has comments from the public. And then, even though I put it on the agenda to have council reports, I think it would be appropriate to, after the public comment, to not and go home. So,
So is there anybody in the audience live here today that would like to make a public comment to, yeah, come on up. You first and then you, Andre, okay? Hi.
Good evening, council. Thank you for doing your work that you do for us. A couple of things I'm noticing. I've been looking at.
Excuse me, what's your name?
I'm sorry. Star Carroll. I live on 100 block of Boulder Street, 124.
Hi, Star.
So I'm in-town resident. I was looking at the city council's website and noticed that there was a talk about meeting every 6 months to review, and I'm seeing some of these things that have come up over and over and over again. And I'm going to talk about a couple of different things and hopefully coherently weave them together because they kind of relate to that idea. Looking at this as housekeeping, you guys take out the trash and do the dishes for the town, basically, right? It gets down to it. Some of the concepts that I see you dealing with can be distilled into different departments if you look at it as a store might. A lot of these things kind of come under, like, for instance, infrastructure. I would see Park and Rec as part of infrastructure. Things that you're dealing with that I see coming up over and over again, how can you have a vibrant town if there's potholes and sidewalks are unwalkable? So just thinking of things practically. Also, vibrancy is kind of an ideological, ephemeral concept, and I think as a goal or an initiative, that's not the best use of your skills and your hard work, because if a town works well, it's going to be vibrant. And if you look up the definition of vibrancy, I think you'll get that. Also, as a Nisenan supporter and a supporter of the city, I've gone to several workshops that happened years ago with other city councils, and some of these same things were issues then. They're still issues. So I'm curious how much you look at the history of what preceding councils have had in front of them to do and what they accomplished, and that might be helpful. If I would hope you're already doing that. I went to a workshop, oh boy, I can't remember exactly how many years ago. It's within the last 5 or 6 years. At the park, for the park, apparently there was some funding for the park, and a group of citizens, residents, came together with Dawn to go over what we thought would be the best use of that funding. First of all, I never saw anything after that. I never saw the city say, hey, we did this funding, we got this funding, here's what we accomplished with it, which I think is really helpful to do your own PR. And that goes along with transparency and communication. If you're going to do something and tackle it, as a resident, I'd like to know a little bit more about it. So I think that's really behooves you and helps you to tell us, it didn't work, we only got this far, here's what we achieved, here's the money that we used, and here's what we accomplished. But we talked about the park, and I mentioned this is a huge part of the city's identity. This park, people come not only from the local communities, but from out of town to the park. The elephant in the room to me was that there's no Nisenan presence in the park. And Dawn said, well, I'm not a gardener, and that wasn't my intention at all to make her in charge of native plants. But I'm thinking the idea of parks as part of infrastructure, but also meeting the goal of supporting Nisenan, because you guys have a budget, we have a budget, and there's only so many things you can do. And I think the reciprocity is a really good idea, and contributing money towards that program is a really good idea. But why not weave that into money that can be spent in the park? So just some thoughts for you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Star.
I'd like to comment on that. Star, thank you so much. I really appreciate all comments and talk about the Nisenan. Shelley Covert and I, the spokeswoman for the tribe, are in a good relationship. And for me, it's always about what do they want? What are their needs? What are their priorities? And right now, their priorities are not presence in the park necessarily, right? And so, so just noting that, somebody came with a great idea a while back and said, oh, we should do some of the signs, the sign to the entry, we should do the Nevada City sign. It should also say Ustama. It should say this, which I think is all great and good and well intended. But really going back to the Nisenan and saying, is this what you want? How do you feel about this? How might this impact the tribe?
definitely.
And there's definitely the education piece, like more presence in town, I think is really important. And I think for me, the focus for them right now is more of that hierarchy of needs, some of their base level needs. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Star. Andre, come on up.
Hello, Dan. Hello to you.
Hi, Andre.
I am going to try to do like 5 ideas in 3 minutes. So, as for parking, there was a parking garage that was approved in 2019. Nothing ever happened about it, but it was approved. So, considering that, you could, instead of just a waste of space, of just parking, number one, you need to appoint somebody who really understands 1800s architecture, because gingerbread is not, I mean, yes, houses, but buildings, no, they didn't use it on buildings. No, but number two, you could have a parking garage, you could have a disaster area, like a bomb shelter in the basement. You can have a skate park on the roof. You can have like little garden area for like other people around the perimeter to hang out, fountains, have it pleasant, and like the skate park for the kids, so long as nobody falls off the roof. You gotta build fencing for that.
Fencing.
Right, but anyhow,
Trampolines.
like idea number two, housing. I've been looking around the area, and one thing, I'm all for like improving Seven Hills, but really it's like an auxiliary area. Nobody really wants to hang out in Seven Hills. I mean, I've got to be honest. Business owners won't like the sound of it, but it's true. The Alpha building, however, is really perfect. There's a lot of space there. The whole upstairs area could be converted into apartments. The downstairs area, when I lived in Las Vegas, they had a thing called the Container Park. And what it is it's businesses, small, tiny, micro businesses, to fit in a tiny storage container. You could rent that out, the bottom, and have it be a mall. Have a committee for things, businesses you need in the area, like somebody who sells hardware, for instance, because it was a hardware store. But like you could have 12 different businesses in there, and that would be, kind of good. As for fire safety and many other things, this is more of a county plan, but I've already talked about it with Rachel and Ruse, and she's very fond of the idea. I have an idea of having a kind of a work, I want to call it a workhouse, but that's not very politically correct in today's world. But anyhow, a place where if you have people, for instance, that are on probation or doing community service, if they have nonviolent crimes, you build and people who are homeless as well, that you get the bus to go out there, a couple times a day, and they go out and do fire safety clearing. You can also do manufacturing of, lumber, pulp. Why, for instance, buy pulp from other places when you can manufacture it yourself? And you have building materials, that's wood, of course, that's free, that you're producing. You can sell stuff, and you can have people working, regardless of ability level, either, doing one thing or another, and you can have drug treatment, rehab out there. You can have yoga teachers volunteer. You can have nutritionalists come out. One of the things of getting people off of substances is breaking them out of the sort of triggers that they're constantly around. You get people out in the woods and fresh air, good nutrition. You can grow gardens out there. It would just be good health. Last idea is this would require some money, but honestly, the amount of money that, for instance, the county spends on its projects like Brunswick Commons, for instance, and dive motels that nobody wants to live in, it wouldn't be that bad. There is a tunnel underneath this town. Every everybody would be interested in this, especially of Asian descent, would be interested in this as a tourist attraction. I've already talked about this with Daniela, and Dan, too, heard a little bit of this. But if you make that safe and dig it out further, like in New York, in the subway system, they have businesses down there. Every building in this town has a basement that is just not used for anything. It's just used for storage. The only people who actually use it for anything is the Mexican store. I mean, the Oaxacan, the Lobos Del Mar. But everybody else doesn't. So you could basically, all of the bars are linked by this tunnel. So it's a great way to revitalize for nightlife. You know, I mean, you could have a whole underground thing, and plus an area for disaster preparedness as well. You know, filtered air coming in, etc. You know, I mean, it's just it's a good disaster preparedness thing. It's a good revitalization thing. It's a really unique historical piece, and it's something that people, I really think that people would come from like San Francisco and other outlying areas just to see it. The Atlanta Underground is like probably the biggest tourist attraction they have. So, I mean, and this is like a real historical past to it. So, I mean, I think I did okay for the 3 minutes.
Got them all. Those are great ideas.
Well, I have another one, but I don't have time for that. So, later.
Love you, Andre.
We'll hear about it next time.
No, those are some good ideas. I like the pulp manufacturing. I think we should do that. All right, is there any other public comment in the room? You're going to have to look.
I thought Gabby was going to get public comment.
Is there anybody in the cyberspace who wants to talk to us and tell us things?
No? Okay.
Okay. So then,
Mom, are you out there? Do you have anything to say?
you know your mom's out there. So I just want to have one piece of information that's relevant to fire. What's her face? Nancy Weber and I wrote a concept proposal for the Sierra Nevada Conservancy. That was to get invited to the full application. We were approved. This is for a shaded fuel break on Deer Creek. That is sort of moving forward, and I wanted to tell you guys about it so you guys can bubble it up in there. Tomorrow, we're going to meet with, is it tomorrow or Friday, we're going to meet with NID to see if they will help support the grant, and, you know, there's some watershed issues, so that's going on. I just wanted to put that out there. If anybody else has a burning issue to talk about, now's the time. Yeah, get it? Sean, do you have anything to add? Not too long?
I will my report and say I was being facetious when I said Lennox is my favorite, clearly.
Okay, because it's Maddox.
Yeah,
Why, did you get some texts since then?
now it's Arabella.
It's going to be everyone else. Well, Gary, go ahead.
I was just going to say that
Sit forward.
when we were last here and we had gone to League of Cities and you complimented how well our city manager managed us and got us where we needed to go and everything else, and I thought that was really nice to say that, and I got home, the guy's got 7 kids, of course he can do this. We were nothing, we were easy.
With a mission statement.
Well, I want to thank everybody, staff, thank you for suffering through this and hanging out with us. Sean, thank you for putting in the work and getting this done. Gabby, thank you. And thank you to the council. This was one of our better sessions.
To our attorney as
And our
well.
attorney, we needed legal advice here, just in case we colored outside the. But no, but I really appreciate all your input today. Council, I really enjoy working with you guys. I think this was really good.
Okay, thanks, bye.
Yeah. Oh. Thanks, bye.